He had loved her for 22 years. He had never said a word. And the one night he finally decided to tell her. Another man walked through the gates. A stranger, an alpha from a rival pack. A man who had never met her, never spoken her name, who looked at her once across a crowded compound and stopped, because she was his. The mate bond doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't care about timing. It doesn't care about the man standing right beside her, who has been quietly breaking for years. Now she has to choose. The love that was built, slowly, over a lifetime, or the love that arrived like lightning, without warning, and refuses to leave. This is not a story about who she picks. This is a story about who she becomes. The morning arrived the way all mornings did in Ashwood, with bird song and cold air and the smell of wood smoke threading through the packhouse walls. Elara Voss was already at the kitchen counter, when the light was still grey, braiding her dark hair over one shoulder with the easy, unthinking motion of someone who has done the same thing every day, for years. She was not thinking about anything important. She rarely did at this hour. Mornings, in her experience, were for coffee and quiet before the rest of the world woke up and needed things from her. She was 22 years old, human-born, pack-raised, and comfortable. Or something near enough to comfortable that she had stopped examining the difference. The Ashwood pack had been her world since birth. Her father had been a ranked wolf before he died. Her mother had stayed on at Alpha Ford's invitation. And so Elara and her sister Maren had grown up running these halls, learning these trees, belonging here in the complicated, graceful way of people who are loved without being quite the same as everyone around them. She did not think of it as lonely. She thought of it as specific. Her life had a shape she recognized, and she fit it well enough. The kettle boiled. She reached for her cup. Outside, through the kitchen window, the compound was waking. She could hear the low voices of the morning patrol returning, the distant clang of training equipment being laid out, the particular rhythm of a wolf pack in its daily motion. She knew every sound. She could have mapped this world in the dark. She poured her coffee and went out to the porch. The air was sharp and cold and clean, the sky just beginning to turn from pale grey to gold along the eastern tree line. She wrapped both hands around her cup and stood on the top step and looked out at the grounds, and for a moment, just a moment, she felt it, that low, quiet thing she never quite named, a sense of waiting, of incompleteness, of a life that was full, and also in some room she rarely opened, not yet begun. She dismissed it, as she always did. She drank her coffee. The morning was beautiful. That was enough. He found her on the porch, as he nearly always did. Callum Gray had an instinct for Elara, had possessed it for so long that he had ceased to examine it, the way you stop examining, the reason you always reach for the same mug, the same chair, the same face in a crowd. She was simply where his instincts pointed him. That had always seemed like enough. He came around the corner of the pack house with mud on his boots from the dawn patrol and a grin that belonged on someone who had not been awake since 4 in the morning. And when he saw her standing there with her coffee and her faraway expression, something in his chest did its familiar quiet thing. The thing it had been doing for years. The thing he had never given a name. "You missed patrol," he said, dropping into the chair beside her. "I was invited to patrol?" She raised an eyebrow. "Standing invitation. You always decline." "Because I like sleeping." He took her coffee without asking. She let him without looking. This was the language of 22 years of friendship. A shorthand, so developed it had become its own dialect. Spoken only between the two of them. He handed the cup back. She drank from the same side he had. Neither of them noticed. Callum leaned back in his chair and looked out at the compound. The pack members moving through their morning routines, the training grounds where the younger wolves were already at work. The line of the forest beyond the fence, dark and familiar. "Alpha Ford wants the border survey done before the Ironstone delegation arrives," he said. His voice was easy, casual, the kind of casual that costs something. When do they come? 3 days. Who? The new Alpha, 2 guards, routine territorial business. She nodded. He watched her in his peripheral vision, the profile he had memorized by accident over 2 decades, the line of her jaw, the way she held her cup in both hands when she was thinking. He had something to tell her, had been building toward it for longer than he could account for. There was a speech half assembled in his chest, waiting for the right architecture of moment and courage. He thought about saying it now. The morning was quiet. She was right there. "Callum," she said before he could. "Yeah, what aren't you saying?" He looked at her. For one unguarded second, everything he had been not saying arranged itself in his expression. Visible, raw, enormous. Then he blinked and put it away. "Nothing. I'll write up the survey route. Meet me at the boundary line at 2. She looked at him for a moment longer, the way she always looked at him when she knew he was lying, and then she let it go. She always let it go. He had always counted on this. He would spend the rest of his life understanding what a mistake that had been. The boundary oaks were old, silver-barked and vast, their roots knotted together underground like the clasped hands of people who had been standing side by side for centuries. Pack markers had been carved into them for 3 generations. If you pressed your palm to the bark, you could feel the ghost of old claws. Elara walked the route with Callum in the late afternoon light, clipboard in hand, recording markers while he checked the physical posts. They had done this walk 100 times. It should have felt like nothing. Today it felt like a threshold. She could not have said why. The forest was the forest. The light was that particular amber of late autumn. Callum was beside her, solid and familiar, occasionally calling out a marker number for her to record. Everything was as it had always been, and yet she kept catching him looking at her, not the sidelong glances of habitual proximity, but something more direct, something that had weight behind it. "Do you remember coming out here when we were children?" he asked. "You used to tell me the trees talked at night," she said. "They do. You just have to be still enough." "I was never still enough. You were sometimes." A pause. "You used to fall asleep against that one." He nodded toward the largest oak, the one with the oldest carvings. "I'd let you sleep and just sit there." She looked at the tree, then at him. "Why are you telling me that?" He stopped walking. She took one more step before realizing and turned back. He was looking at her with an expression she had never quite seen on his face before, or had seen, perhaps, and trained herself not to read. "Elara." "What?" The wind moved through the oaks. Something shifted in the undergrowth, a deer probably, or a young wolf on perimeter, or the universe leaning in to listen. "I want to talk to you. After the delegation visit. There's something I want to say it properly." Her heart did something she did not examine. "Okay," she said. He picked up the clipboard from her hands, their fingers brushing, both of them going still for a half-second at the contact, the way you do when something ordinary suddenly announces itself as not ordinary at all. He kept walking. She followed. The light deepened around them. In the east, past the tree line, the sky had gone the color of iron. The gates opened at dusk on the 3rd day. The whole pack had assembled in the loose, watchful way of wolves who were too proud to appear eager, scattered across the compound in various attitudes of occupation, all of them oriented, without admitting it, toward the iron gates. Alpha Ford stood at the front of the steps with Callum at his left shoulder, and Callum wore the expression Elara privately called his beta face, composed, professional, entirely closed. She had no reason to be standing here. She was not ranked. She was not part of the official welcome. She was here because Callum had, 3 days ago, asked her to stay close, and she had said yes without thinking, the way she said yes to most things he asked. She stood beside Marin near the edge of the gathered crowd, and she watched the gates. 3 black SUVs, the lead vehicle's door opening first, 2 guards, broad and quiet, scanning the compound with professional efficiency. Then the second door. Then Caden Vale stepped out. He was tall, dark-haired. He wore plain clothes, dark trousers, a grey shirt with the sleeves rolled to the forearm. And yet he occupied the space the way a storm occupies a valley. Completely, without effort, making everything around him reorganize in deference to his presence. He moved with the particular economy of someone who had learned to contain enormous force, and he was looking across the assembled crowd with the measured distance of a man who had been to many pack gatherings and expected nothing remarkable from this one. Then his eyes found her and stopped. The world did not end. The sky did not crack. There was no thunder, no cinematic rearrangement of the light. There was only a recognition, older than language, older than the pack, older than the boundary oaks, older than any name she had for what was happening in her chest. She felt it the way you feel a door open in a room you did not know had a door. The sudden cold air, the sudden light, the sudden awareness of how confined you had been without ever realizing it. Something in her chest opened, warmth spreading outward, slow and inexorable as honey. A sense of arrival so profound it was almost grief, the grief of recognizing something you have always needed and have only just found. He felt it too. She could see it in the way his body went briefly, entirely still. A man who had walked into something he had not prepared for, who understood exactly what it was, and who was, in real time, deciding how to carry it. Then Alpha Ford stepped forward, and the moment sealed itself shut. Caden moved to greet the older Alpha with perfect composure, extending his hand, saying the appropriate words, his voice even and low. Only someone watching very carefully would have noticed the slight tension in his jaw. Elara noticed. She became aware, distantly, that she had stopped breathing. "Elara," Marin said quietly beside her, "you've gone white. I'm fine." She was not fine. She had no framework yet for what she was. Across the compound, Callum was standing at Alpha Ford's shoulder, performing his beta role with flawless precision. But she caught the moment he glanced at her, and she saw, in that glance, that he had not missed what had passed between her and the stranger. His expression did not change. He looked back at Caden, his hands, at his sides, curled briefly into fists. The great hall was warm with candlelight, and the smell of roasted meat and pine resin, and Elara found herself 3 seats from Caden at the long table, by the arrangement of a seating plan that had not consulted her feelings. She focused with great attention on her wine. She was acutely aware of him, the way you are aware of a fire in a room, not by looking at it directly, but by the warmth on your skin, the way your body orients toward it without being asked. She knew which direction he was sitting. She would have known in the dark. Callum was at her left shoulder. His presence was the anchor it had always been. Familiar, warm, the known weight of him. She focused on him instead, took comfort in the specific gravity of 22 years. Caden was speaking with Alpha Ford about territorial markers, his voice measured and careful. He did not look at her. He was, she understood, making a deliberate effort not to. The way you do not look at the sun, because the sun has the power to burn you, and you are not yet ready to be burned. She found this, for reasons she could not entirely articulate, a small consolation. "You're not eating," Callum said quietly beside her. "I'm eating. You've moved the same piece of bread 4 times. She put the bread down. He gave her the look, the one that was the concentrated texture of decades of knowing her, and she felt, acutely, how much she did not want to have this conversation. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," he went still. Not with surprise, but with the particular stillness of someone receiving information they had already been dreading. "Is it him?" She opened her mouth. At that exact moment, 3 seats away, Caden said something to Alpha Ford. Not to her, not about her, something entirely mundane, and his voice moved through her like a current, and she saw Callum see her flinch. "Elara, please don't ask me to explain it. I can't yet." A long silence. The dinner conversation moved around them, indifferent. Then, beneath the table, Callum's hand found hers, not holding, just resting his fingertips against her knuckles, a small private declaration, "I am here. Whatever this is, I am here." She pressed her fingers against his. Across the table, Caden lifted his wine glass. He did not look at her. The muscle in his jaw was working. She could not sleep. She rarely could when something large was moving toward her, and this was the largest thing that had ever moved toward her in her life. She pulled on a coat over her nightgown and went out to the garden, as she always did when sleep refused her, and stood in the silver moonlight with bare feet in the cold grass and let the night air do its work. She heard him before she saw him. Not footsteps, just a change in the air, the specific quality of presence that she had apparently already learned in a single evening to recognize. She turned. Caden stood at the garden entrance. He was still in his day clothes. He looked like someone who had also not slept, who had come outside for the same reason, who had found instead of solitude a problem he had not planned for. They looked at each other across the dark garden. Neither of them moved. The moon was enormous and indifferent overhead. "You should go back inside," he said. "You came outside too." "I know." He crossed the garden toward her. Each step was deliberate, not hesitant but careful, the care of someone who is approaching something fragile and does not want to be the one who breaks it. He stopped close enough that she could see the gray in his eyes that she already somehow knew, the way you know things in dreams. "What is this?" she asked. He exhaled, a long, slow release, as if he had been holding it since the moment he stepped out of the car. "You already know what it is. I want to hear you say it. Why? Because I'm trying to decide if I'm losing my mind." A beat. "You're not losing your mind," he said. "The mate bond recognizes you. It has since the moment I saw you. He stopped. Something moved across his face. An emotion too specific to name, too large to contain. "You're mine. In the way the bond means. I don't know what else to call it." The word mine landed differently than she expected. Not like a claim. Like a truth being stated carefully, like a man reading aloud something he is still processing. "I'm human," she said. "I don't have wolf blood. The mate bond doesn't. Apparently it does." She stared at him. He held her gaze, steady, unguarded, not flinching from the weight of what was happening. "I have someone," she said. Something shifted in his face. Controlled, quick. "The beta. We're not officially, but he matters to me. Enormously. But you love him." The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Not a confirmation, not a denial, but something more complicated than either. She watched him absorb it. "I'm not asking you to choose tonight," he said. "I'm not asking you to choose at all. That has to be yours." He reached up, slowly, telegraphing every movement, giving her every chance to step back, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her jaw barely. She felt it in her spine, in her sternum, in the backs of her knees. "But I needed you to know what you are to me," he said. "Whatever you do with that, it's yours." He stepped back, nodded once, almost formal, as if they had just concluded a treaty. "Good night, Elara." He walked back inside. She stood in the garden for a long time, with the moon overhead and the cold grass under her feet, and the feeling, new and terrifying and impossible to unknow, of having been seen completely. Not by the bond, by him. She found him at his desk in the early morning, as she had found him 1,000 times before, writing up patrol reports in the careful, methodical handwriting that had not changed since he was 12 years old. He heard her come in. He did not turn immediately, the pause of someone arranging their expression. When he turned, his face was open in a way she had never seen it. He stood. He crossed the room to her. He stopped close and looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything he had been carrying. Years of it, patient and private and enormous, laid bare at last. "I was going to tell you last night," he said. "After dinner." I had the words ready. "Callum, no, let me." She went still. "I love you," he said. His voice was low and even, and it cost him everything. "I have loved you for so long. Since, before I had a word for it, since you were 7 and fell asleep against that oak tree, and I sat beside you for 2 hours because I didn't want you to wake up alone. I love you, and I never said it, and I'm saying it now because I think I've run out of time." She felt the words enter her like stones dropped in still water, the ripples spreading through everything. "You felt it with him, didn't you?" he said. "The bond." She did not answer. She didn't have to. He had known her face for 22 years. He nodded, one sharp movement, composing himself. "I know what the mate bond is. I know it isn't a choice. I know it isn't a reflection of your feelings for me, or the value of what we have." He stopped, drew a breath. "But I need you to hear me. Whatever happens, I loved you first. Not because of a bond, not because of instinct or chemistry or anything I couldn't help. Because of you, because of who you are. That has to mean something." She reached up and took his face in her hands, both of them, deliberate, the way you hold something you do not want to drop. He closed his eyes. "It means everything," she said. But, he opened his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, longer than was comfortable, and she let him, because he had earned every second of it. "Don't ask me to be happy about this yet," he said. "I won't. Give me some time, as much as you need." He turned his face slightly and pressed his cheek against her palm, and they stood like that in the pale morning light. Her hands on his face, his eyes closed, the weight of a love that had been kept too long, in the dark pressing against both of them. It was not a romantic scene. It was better than that. It was the truest thing. She was supposed to be inventorying the supply stores. She was on her 3rd count of the same shelf, when she gave up the pretense entirely and put down her clipboard and looked through the window at the training ground where the Ironstone Alpha was running a combat drill with one of his guards. Caden moved like someone who had learned force and then learned control and understood that control was the more formidable weapon. He was not brutal. He was precise. Each movement deliberate and efficient, nothing wasted, nothing performed. She watched him make a correction to his guard's stance with a touch that was brief and technical and somehow more commanding than any display of strength. He stopped, looked directly at her through the window. The distance between them, 30 feet, a pane of glass, ceased to function as distance. The warmth again, immediate and involuntary, like stepping from shade into sun. Her body knew him before her mind could catch up, and she was beginning to understand that this was what the bond was. Not a feeling imposed from outside, but a recognition of something already present, as if some deep cellular part of her had been keeping a space open for years and had only just understood why. Maren appeared beside her. "He's been looking at you all morning," she said. "I know. Callum's been watching you watch him. I know." Maren was quiet for a moment. Then, more carefully, "The mate bond is real, Elle. I've seen it. I've watched it change people, reshape entire lives. And I've watched Callum love you for 22 years without a single word of complaint." A pause. "Both of those things are real. You don't have to pretend this is simple." "No one is asking me to." "Good. I'm just saying whatever you choose, choose it. Don't let anyone else's comfort make the decision for you." Outside, Caden had returned to the drill. He had his back to her now. She thought about what Maren had said, not the advice, but the assumption beneath it, that there was a choice to be made, that it was hers, that it would cost something no matter which direction she moved. She already knew all of this. Knowing it didn't make it lighter. She picked up her clipboard. She counted the shelf again. The storm broke that afternoon without apology, the way summer storms do, fast and total, remaking the world in silver in the space of 10 minutes. Elara was caught on the eastern ridge, returning from a perimeter errand, and she sheltered under the wide overhang of an ancient rock face, and listened to the rain hammer the stone, and tried to sort out her own interior, weather which was not cooperating. She heard footsteps on the path, a wolf's tread, nearly silent, but she had learned, apparently, to recognize this one. Caden rounded the ridge and stopped when he saw her. He was already wet, dark hair plastered to his forehead, grey shirt clinging, water running from his jaw. He looked at her with an expression of faint, resigned recognition, as though the universe were making a point, and he was too honest to pretend it wasn't. He joined her under the overhang without being invited. There wasn't quite room for two, but they managed, standing side by side, watching the rain erase the path. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. This was alarming. "Are you all right?" he asked. "After last night, I'm thinking a great deal." "What are you thinking about?" She considered lying, decided against it. "Whether the bond makes the choice for me," she said, "or whether it's one factor in a choice that's still mine to make." He thought about this seriously. Not the performance of consideration, but the real thing. She appreciated that about him, she realized, the way he did not simplify. "I think it's the second," he said. "The bond tells you this person matters. It doesn't tell you what to do about it. Have you felt it before? With anyone? No. Does that mean something?" "I think it means we're both in unmapped territory." She laughed, small and surprised. He looked at her when she laughed, and something in his expression shifted, an unguarded softening, there and gone in a second, but she caught it. "Tell me something about yourself that isn't Alpha of Ironstone," she said. He was quiet for a moment, genuinely searching. "Irid. History, mostly. My pack thinks it's eccentric. It isn't, I know. They disagree." She smiled. He watched her smile. "Tell me something about you. I've lived inside a wolf pack my whole life, and I've never shifted. Never run the boundary at night. Never felt the pull of the full moon in my blood." She looked at the rain. "I know everything about this world, and I'm not entirely of it. Sometimes I think that's beautiful. Sometimes I think it's just lonely." He turned to look at her. The expression on his face was not pity and not sympathy, but something sharper and more useful, recognition. "I know that feeling," he said. "Not for the same reason, but I know it." She looked back at him. Something passed between them that was not the bond, or was the bond and more than the bond and also two people, two specific people, finding each other across the specific distances of their specific lives. The rain stopped. The world glittered. Neither of them moved to leave. Callum was on his third drink. Not drunk, because he was too much of a beta to be drunk during a diplomatic visit, but looser than usual, unmoored in a way that showed only if you knew what to look for. Alpha Ford, who had known Callum since he was 8 years old, knew exactly what to look for. The old Alpha settled beside him at the end of the table, and they sat together watching the hall, the easy movement of the pack, the Ironstone guards keeping to themselves, and, at the far end, Elara speaking with Caden. She was gesturing. That particular gesture she used when she was explaining something she genuinely cared about, her whole hand moving like she was shaping the idea out of air. Caden was listening with the full weight of his attention, which Callum knew, from watching powerful people his whole life, was a rare and specific thing. "You knew," Alpha Ford said. "Not about him, but I knew. I always thought I had more time. The bond moves when it moves. She's human. It shouldn't even. And yet." The old Alpha was quiet for a moment. "She is human, Callum. She was also raised in a wolf pack by a wolf pack. Perhaps the bond does not care about blood as much as we assume." Callum said nothing. His glass was empty. "She won't choose him only because of the bond," he said finally. "That's not who she is. She'll make a real choice. She always makes real choices." "I believe you." A pause. "Then let me ask you something brutal," Alpha Ford said. "Go ahead. If she chooses you, not because of the bond, not because of what she feels, but because she refuses to surrender to it. What does that mean? For you? For her? What does it mean to be chosen out of resistance rather than love?" The question sat between them like a stone. Callum put down his empty glass. He looked across the hall at Elara. She was laughing at something Caden had said. That laugh, the one he had been collecting for years, the one he knew by heart. "It's a brutal question," he said. "You're a beta. You were built for brutal questions." He watched her laugh. He heard it as he had always heard it, like water over rock. And for the first time he allowed himself to hear, beneath the familiar joy of it, the question he had been avoiding. Whether the love he had carried all these years had been love, or whether it had been, also, possession. Whether he had been waiting for the right moment, or whether he had been, without knowing it, preventing one. He didn't answer Alpha Ford. He didn't have one yet. She found him in the garden again, their accidental meeting place, the universe's joke. He was sitting on the stone wall at the garden's edge, not looking at the forest for once, but down at his own hands, which were loosely clasped between his knees. He looked for the first time since she had met him, young, unguarded in a way that had nothing to do with her. She sat beside him without being invited. He did not move away. "You could have pushed," she said. "You feel the bond. You could have used it. Some alphas would have." "Some have," he said. "I've seen it." Something private crossed his face. She waited. "My father was an alpha who believed the mate bond was absolute," he said. "That it superseded will, choice, consent. He used it to justify things. Every time someone didn't want what he decided was fated, he called it the bond, called it nature, a pause. He was not a good man." The words were flat and controlled. She understood that the flatness was not absence of feeling, but containment of a great deal of it. "I built Ironstone to be different," he said. "Every policy, every decision, I am not him." "I believe you," she said. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. Relief, perhaps, or the particular gratitude of being believed. "That's the most frightening thing you've said to me yet," she told him. He raised an eyebrow. "Because it means I'm not reacting to the bond when I say it," she said. "I believe you because of you. Because of what I see when I look at you." She stopped. "That's harder to argue with than chemistry." He was quiet for a moment. "What would it look like?" she asked. Her voice was careful, feeling her way through the sentence. What would I be to you? I'm not pack. I don't have a wolf. I'm not. Mine," he said quietly. "And yours. And whatever else you needed to build around that. I don't need you to be a wolf. I need you to be you." She looked at him for a long time. He reached over and took her hand, unhurried, deliberate, giving her every second to pull back. She didn't. They sat on the stone wall in the dark garden, their hands linked, the forest breathing all around them, and something in her chest, something that had been held in a knot for days, began, very slowly, to release. She lay awake for most of the night. Not with anguish, but with the particular alert stillness of someone doing interior work. Somewhere in the small hours the knot fully loosened. Not the knot of the choice, but the knot of the fear around it. She had been afraid of this, she understood. Not afraid of the bond or of Caden or of losing Callum. Not afraid of any one thing, but afraid of the largeness of it all, the way a major decision reshapes everything behind it and everything ahead, leaves nothing untouched. But at some point in the dark, she stopped being afraid and started being honest. She was honest about Callum. What she felt for him was real and permanent, and could not be reduced or explained away, and would not be, regardless of what she chose. He was in her bones. He always would be, but she had spent 22 years beside him, and never felt for him the things she had felt in a single second in a garden, and she could not pretend that was irrelevant. She was honest about Caden. The bond had started it, yes, but she had read him, over 3 days, the way she read the woods, carefully, with full attention, looking for what was actually there, rather than what she expected. And what she found was a man she would have wanted to know, regardless of any supernatural pull. A man who had been shaped by damage and had shaped himself differently in response. That was not chemistry. That was character, and she was honest about herself. She was not choosing between safety and risk. between the familiar and the unknown, between love and a bond. She was choosing between a life she had already lived and a life she had not yet had the courage to begin. That was the choice. That was what it had always been. When the bird started outside her window, she had not slept. She did not feel tired. She got up and dressed, and she went to do two things before the delegation left. His door was open. He was already at his desk, already dressed, the beta, composed and ready, armor back in place. He heard her footsteps and turned without surprise. She sat on the edge of his desk in the way she had sat for 22 years, and he leaned against the wall and braced himself. "I'm going to tell you everything," she said, "and I need you to hear all of it, not just the part that hurts. All right, I love you. What we are is the most important relationship in my life, and it doesn't change because of anything else. You are in my bones, Callum. You always will be." He nodded. His jaw was set. "What I feel for Caden, I can't explain it, and I'm not going to pretend I can. It's different. It came from something older than feeling. But it isn't only the bond anymore. Over 3 days, I've read him. I know him. Not all of him, but enough to know I want to know the rest." She paused. "And you told me to be honest. So that's the honest thing." He looked out the window for a long moment. "Are you going with him?" The question was clean. No accusation, no performance, just the beta asking the real question. "Not today. I need time that isn't this. I need to know it's real outside of the bond's gravity. But I think..." "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think so too." He turned back. His eyes were bright, but he held himself steady in a way that cost her more to witness than any tears would have. "I had 22 years," he said. "I chose to wait for the right moment every single time. And He stopped. "That's mine. That's not the bond's fault. That's not your fault. I chose to wait. Don't do that to yourself. I'm not doing it to myself. I'm just," he exhaled, naming it accurately, "so I don't spend the next year blaming the wrong thing." She crossed to him and held him. Properly, her arms all the way around him, face against his shoulder. He held her back, hard, the way you hold something you are learning to release. "You're going to be okay," she said into his shoulder. "I know," he said into her hair. "I just need a minute to catch up to knowing it." A long pause. "Come back and visit," he said. "Often, and bring decent coffee. Always. And if he's an idiot, you'll be the first call I make." He laughed, short, real, half-broken. "Go on then." The SUVs were idling in the compound. The delegation was loaded. Alpha Ford and Callum stood at the top of the steps, conducting final logistics. And the pack had dispersed, and the morning was cold and clear. And ordinary in all the ways. Mornings are ordinary, just before something decisive. Elara found Caden by the lead vehicle. He was watching her walk toward him, and his face was the face of a man who had trained himself not to hope, and was losing that discipline badly. She stopped in front of him. "I'm not coming with you today." Something moved through his expression, brief, controlled. "I need time outside of this," she said. "Real time, where the bond isn't the only thing in the room. I need to be sure it's me making the choice and not the pull making it for me." He considered this, seriously, without defensiveness. "That's fair. All right, if that's..." "Yes," he said before she finished. She noticed the speed of it. He noticed her noticing. "You're going to read every letter 4 times before you reply," she said. Something rare appeared on his face, a real laugh, low and surprised. "Probably more," he said. She smiled. He smiled. It was a fragile, luminous thing, this smile between them. Two people standing at the edge of something, not jumping yet, but looking down and not looking away. "I'll wait," he said. "Don't wait, live." "All right." He held out his hand. She shook it, formal, deliberate, a callback to their introduction 2 days ago. His thumb pressed once against her knuckles before releasing. He got in the car. She stood on the gravel and watched the convoy move through the gates and disappear into the tree line. The compound was very quiet. Callum appeared beside her, not touching, just present, just there the way he had always been. "Okay?" he asked. getting there. That's honest enough. They stood together in the cold morning air and watched the empty drive, and neither of them said anything else, because there was nothing else that needed saying. Not now, not yet. There was only the space of the decision, and the strange, sore feeling of having finally arrived somewhere true. 6 weeks, 12 letters from her to Ironstone, 11 replies she had counted, and the discrepancy was unexplained until the 12th arrived, containing, folded inside it, the letter he had written first, and then not sent because he had thought it was too much. It was not too much. It was exactly right. Her desk was covered in his handwriting. Precise, economical, and entirely unable, despite the controlled brevity of most sentences, to conceal the person behind them. She had been reading him in these letters the way she had promised herself she would. Not looking for the bond, looking for him, for what he noticed, how he thought, what he chose to say and what he chose to leave unsaid, and what he revealed in the leaving. She liked him. That was the thing. Not just the pull, not just the recognition. She liked him. She was interested in him. She wanted to know the rest. She read his last letter for the 5th time when Marin appeared in the doorway. The Alpha of Ironstone is requesting a second diplomatic visit, Marin said, with the particular expression of someone delivering information they have already fully processed. Very official letter, seal and everything. A diplomatic visit. He used the phrase continued territorial cooperation 3 times. Callum says it's the most transparently personal official letter he's ever read. Elara put the letter down. Callum said that? Callum has been remarkably decent about all of this, he said. And I'm quoting, if she's happy, I'll learn to be. He's not happy yet. But he means the yet. She looked at the letter in her hands, then at Marin. Is it real? Marin asked. Outside the bond, is it real? Yes, she said. Not without thinking, exactly with thinking, with 6 weeks of thinking. Then right back. He ran the border survey alone. He had been doing that, choosing the tasks that used to belong to the 2 of them, and doing them solo, not as punishment, but as practice. Relearning the weight of his own company. Finding out what was left when you removed the person you had organized your life around. More than he had feared. That was the answer. There was more left than he had feared. He was not all right yet. He would not claim that. There was a specific sore shape in his chest that had no name. The shape of a thing that had been present for 22 years, and was now differently arranged. But he was intact. He was still himself. He had always known, underneath everything, that Elara did not complete him. She mattered to him enormously. But his shape was his own. He was beginning to feel the outline of it. He stopped at the oldest oak, put his hand on the bark. The wood was cold and rough beneath his palm. He had loved her quietly for too long, waiting for a moment that never arrived, and perhaps that in the end was also an answer. Not a cruel one, not a wasted one. He had loved her fully and well, and that love had not diminished her or him or the 22 years of genuine, foundational, irreplaceable closeness between them. It had only failed to become something else. That was allowed. That was human. She was still his, just differently. He could live with differently. He finished the survey. He walked back through the amber light of late afternoon, and he let himself, for the first time, think about what might come next. Not what he had lost, but what was still open. What was still possible. The forest was very quiet around him. He thought he could hear the trees. Bow 1 car this time. No guards, no formal convoy, no flag of diplomatic occasion. Just Ed Cadenvale stepping out of the passenger seat onto the gravel of the Ashwood compound in the grey shirt she had, already, embarrassingly, begun to think of as his. He had arrived at the time she told him in her last letter. She had told him the time because she wanted to be ready, which was to say. She had told him the time because she wanted to be here. She was at the top of the porch steps. She had been there for 7 minutes. He walked toward her across the compound, not quickly, the same unhurried deliberateness she had come to know as his particular rhythm. She walked down the steps to meet him. They closed the distance between them and stopped when they were close. "Diplomatic visit," he said. "Continued territorial cooperation," she replied. "Very official." Callum read the letter. He said it was the most transparently personal official letter he'd ever seen. Something flickered across Caden's face. Not quite embarrassment, something more genuine than that. "I spent 4 drafts on it." It showed. A small silence. The ordinary sounds of the pack around them, voices, movement, the distant sound of the training ground. The world proceeding at its usual pace, entirely unconcerned. "I read your last letter 11 times, he said. She looked at him. "What did it say?" "That you were done being careful." She reached up and took his face in her hands. The same gesture she had given Callum in a different room, in different grief, given now in something that was still growing and not yet named, but was unmistakably, irrevocably real. He closed his eyes. The tension in him, weeks of it, distance and patience and restraint, and 11 readings of a single letter, came undone. She kissed him, not tentatively, not exploratorily, with the full weight of a decision that had been made carefully and completely and would not be unmade. When she drew back, his hands were in her hair. And he was looking at her the way someone looks at a thing they were not sure they would ever actually have. "You're sure," he said. "The bond said it first," she said, "but I'm saying it now for myself." He nodded. The slow, real nod of someone who has been handed something precious and is taking a moment to understand the weight of it. Then, quietly, as if trying out a new language, "Elara, Caden." He laughed, she laughed. It was quiet and real and entirely theirs, not the bond, not fate, not anything decided for them. Just 2 people, in a compound in the late afternoon light, finding each other ridiculous in the best possible way. There were 3 of them, Elara and Caden and Callum, walking the boundary survey route in the amber light of late afternoon. Callum carrying clipboard as he always had. Caden on Elara's other side, learning the markers and the history of the trees with the quiet, thorough attention of someone who reads history. He asked questions. Callum answered them. The exchange between them was not easy yet, but it was honest, and honesty was a beginning. They stopped at the oldest oak. "How old is this one?" Caden asked. "Older than the pack records," Callum said. "Nobody knows exactly." "Does it talk?" He said it entirely without irony. Callum went still for a moment, processing, and then looked at Elara. "You told him." "He asked me things in his letters," I answered honestly. "You mentioned me in your letters to him." "You are an important part of my life," she said, with total equanimity. Callum looked at Caden for a long moment. Caden looked back, steady, not combative, not performing, just present. "They do talk," Callum said finally. "You have to be still enough to hear them." Caden considered the oak with complete seriousness, and then nodded. The nod of someone who believes this, because it is the kind of thing that is true. "I believe that." Something passed across Callum's face. Brief, real, not quite approval, something quieter and more durable than approval. An adjustment, a beginning. He nodded back. The 3 of them stood in the amber light beneath the oldest tree in Ashwood, the forest breathing all around them, the pack sounds drifting from a comfortable distance, the world proceeding in its usual unhurried way. The boundary markers stood in their silent row. Generation upon generation of claw and intention, the accumulated evidence of a pack insisting on its own edges. But here, at the edge, the light did something complicated. It fell on all 3 of them at once, indifferent to old categories, to what had come before and what had almost been. It fell on Elara, who was not a wolf and was not fully outside, and who had finally stopped pretending this was a problem. It fell on Callum, who was rearranging his heart from the inside, with the quiet competence he brought to everything difficult. It fell on Caden, who had come for a territory negotiation and left with something that could not be administered, only accepted. and on her, standing between them, belonging to both and exclusively to neither. The light fell cleanest of all. She had been waiting her whole life to arrive somewhere. She understood now that she had been somewhere all along. The oldest oak was very still. High up in its branches, something moved. A shift of leaves, a settling of old wood, the specific quiet of a thing that has been listening for a long time and is finally satisfied. She was quiet enough to hear it.